All right, I'm your host, Tyler Narducci, and welcome back to another episode of the Profit Playbook podcast, where we talk about all things agency growth. If you find any value in this show at all, guys, please drop us some love by liking the video on YouTube or consider subscribing to the show. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Today, I have with me Audrey Kwan, the owner of AJK Consulting and the host of the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. Audrey helps agency owners grow their businesses without feeling like employees, allowing them to reclaim their time to do the things that they love. With extensive experience in building agencies, she has assisted agency owners in selling and exiting their businesses and has consulted for agency teams of over 200 members. Audrey and her team have coached and consulted over 120 marketers, creatives, and consultants, contributing to the success of multiple seven-figure agencies. Audrey has a deep understanding of the agency industry and leadership thanks to her extensive 20-year experience in the field. With a master's degree in communications and specializing in organizational development, she has the expertise needed to grow, lead, and operate a mighty agency. Audrey, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
My gosh, thank you for that amazing introduction. I really appreciate it.
It was pretty impressive, right? I love going through the intros of our guests because we have such awesome guests here, and it's just like it always wows me every time I go through it. So Audrey, today we are talking about agency leadership. So my first question for you, I think, is something that a lot of agency owners have to grapple with as they're growing. A lot of us start off as solopreneurs or freelancers, digital marketers, grow into an agency and continue it from there. So when you're at that level, there's a lot of doer mindset. So how does one transition from more of a doer mindset to a leader mindset in a growing agency?
hmm I love how you just brought out one of the key challenges from a small agency owner. Because typically, and Tyler, you and I both know this, a small agency owner, how they become a small agency owner is they typically have a skill set that they're really, really good at. And that skill set then leads them to operate an agency because guess what? They get so busy with that skill set that they're at capacity. And then the next thing you know, they have to bring people in to help them do the work, right? And that essentially changes their role inside their small agency. So they have to go from this person who's being what I call an excellent doer to now becoming and stepping into more of a manager and leader role. And the one thing that really gets in the way, I call it the curse of expertise. So the curse of expertise means that, hey, your expertise leads you to be an excellent person to execute everything, right? You're leveraging your attention of detail, your efficiency, and your ability to follow your own process and systems and do the thing. But in order to grow an agency, you've got to get out of that doer mentality, which is the executor and the person who knows how to do everything, into what I call a manager or leader role. Now, if you're a really small agency, you are going to step into more of a managerial role, right? And the difference between a managerial role and a leader role is this. A managerial role a managerial role looks over and ensures that the people in the organization, in this case, your small agency, is helping you do the work. So you're empowering them to do the work, right? Whereas in a leadership role, you're guiding people towards a very clear vision and goal. And I think in a smaller agency environment, when you have contractors versus full-time employees, you're more of a manager versus that leadership role. Because if people are contractors, they essentially have their own businesses. While you can share your vision and your goals, you're not exactly assigning them what I would call, key performance indicators and doing performance reviews with them, right? So you're more in that managerial role and leading them into understanding what your vision is and what they have to hit in order to help you get to your vision.
Yeah, I think that's a really great distinction, because there's that that's huge. A lot of startup agency owners and a lot of beginner, as you're a freelancer and you're growing into the space, you work with white label partners or you work with that freelancer or the fulfillment partners, and you're not necessarily hiring directly from the beginning. I know I did that myself, and I kind of found exactly what you're talking about here, which is, you don't really have those key performance indicators and those check marks and those things that you would normally have with a full-time salaried employee. because you decided to partner with a high level expert who already kind of knows what they're doing. And, maybe they're even better than you possibly were at that execution task that you hired them for. So I think that's a really, really good distinction. What do you think is, the right balance of, when you're starting out? Like I often encourage a lot of, the people that I work with, that when you're just starting out, that it is better to actually go with the white label providers and the contractors at that role, because oftentimes they don't have the cash flow to pay for
Mhm.
those full-time employees in the first place, right? So that white label partner, or those contractors, independent freelancers, those are the perfect fit because they're paid per project, and they're paid after you've been paid for that project already. So it's a more safe route, for the agency owner. Would you recommend that kind of path as well, or what's been your experience?
Yeah, a really good point there. I think when you are hiring contractors, you are putting your business at less risk, because when you have employees, what you're doing is you're saying, look, I'm hiring this person and it's going to be 60, $70,000 that you're going to be paying this person on the, continual, right? Which means that your business has to be able to, of course, provide that money and make that money and do it, right? And have a consistency of clients and flow and all that stuff in order to pay that person that 60 or 70,000 or more, right, for the year. But when you're hiring contractors, there's a flexibility to it, because of course you are not saying that you're employing this person, which means you don't have to pay them month after month after month. Instead, you're saying, hey, look, here's this project. Come in, do the project, because we have this project. It's per project, right? Or it's easier to control, because you might be saying, hey, it's per hours per a month, and those hours might be a minimum of this much, right? Which is available to you, considering that you've done the math of how much your organization can afford at that time for that contractor. I think the key thing, though, when you're thinking about the difference between hiring contractors versus hiring an employee, is this: I don't think that there is a right way or a wrong way to do it. Let me share why I have this opinion. I think that if you are a smaller agency and you have aggressive growth in mind, aggressive growth as in maybe you do want to triple your bottom line this year, but that's pretty aggressive growth when you're tripling the bottom line. It could be very hard for you to do it with contractors, right? Because contractors have their own gigs, own things going on. They have their own business that they're building. But if you are looking at aggressive growth, you have to realize you're going to need someone in your business in a more full-time role to support you to get more done. And that means investing in your business by hiring someone in that full-time role, understanding, of course, how you're going to meet your commitment to get that goal and the ROI of the role that you're hiring, right? So I don't really think that there is a right way or wrong way. I really think how you decide to hire either contractors or employees depends on how you want to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And the resources that you have, and the surety, I guess, you have in yourself in being able to hit those growth benchmarks, right? You could want to scale 3x year over year, but if you're at zero, you haven't yet proven that to yourself that you have that capability. And I mean, I'm all for believe it yourself and everything, but I think, like, I totally agree with you. It really depends on where you're at, how fast you want to grow. I think a good strategy for a lot of newer agency owners would be kind of having that tipping point, maybe partnering with those white labels or those contractors in the beginning. Kind of get your systems down, get your processes down, get your standard operating procedures down. Know that you can do this, see it in real time, and have those clients, get those retainers, know what your recurring revenue is, and see your path to growth. And then kind of have that changeover point. Like, okay,
Yeah, I agree
we
with you.
have this
Yeah, I think
revenue. Now we can pay for the employee. Now let's hit that 3x. You know what I mean? Versus saying, I'm going to hire the employee and really hope I hit 3x so I could pay them. That kind of difference.
yeah, I agree with you. I think what you're saying is like there's positive thinking, which is great, right?
Hmm.
Positive thinking is great,
Hmm.
but positive thinking without a concrete plan behind it, and also proof of concept, right? If you don't
Yeah.
have proof of concept in your business, and proof of concept means this: number one, do you have clients? Number two, do you have a strong marketing and sales funnel in place to bring in more clients? If you don't have a strong marketing sales funnel in place, do you know that you have something that really works for marketing sales right now? And if you double down on that, you would then be able to grow with more ease, right? In which
Right.
case, you'd be freeing yourself up by hiring someone full time to take on the execution stuff that you're doing so you can focus on the marketing sales that you've already have proof of concept in so that you can actually scale the agency, right? So, when we're talking about strategic thinking, that's what we're really talking about. And as a leader and as a manager, those are the things you're stepping into when you hire out the execution role, is that type of strategic thinking that helps you scale the business, not just positive thinking. I think that's what we're talking
Yeah.
about here. Yeah.
Definitely, totally. Same page, same page. On that same kind of question of doer versus leader, um, where do you think, um, like, I think there's a big struggle with a lot of agency owners. I struggle this with myself on uh, letting go of stuff. All right. Like if you have had a successful solopreneur agency, right? Let's say you have, 4 or 5 clients, you're doing well, you do really good work for them, and you're really good. You built your, let's say you built your agency on the back of Facebook ads. You started off as a Facebook ads freelancer, and then you started taking in clients of your own, and you're a great, Facebook ads person, and you're doing that, and you kind of learned how to also become this agency owner on the side, bringing in clients. Now, as you want to continue down the agency path and become that agency leader and become the CEO instead of the ads manager, right? Uh, it can often be a challenge to let go of the actual ads work, let go of that thing that you've originally had your zone of genius in, and bring in somebody, even if they are really, really good. I found that, that letting go process can be a big sticking point for a lot of new agency owners. And also just realizing that it can definitely happen that even if you bring somebody that's really good, they may at the very beginning do a little quote unquote worse than you, right? The performance may dip a little bit while they acclimate to your clients, to your style, to your agency. Getting over that hump and not pulling the projects back from them, doing it yourself so that you can get to the promised land of the real agency owner and not that freelancer. What's like your thoughts on that whole hill that I think a lot of agencies have to face?
Yeah, I think you've described one of the most common hills of growing an agency, which is letting go of the work that you do so you can step into a new role. And I think one of the biggest challenges for new agency owners, that meaning that maybe they have like their first two people that they're trying to lead and helping them execute the work, right? I think one of the biggest things that they miss out on and don't think about is their own leadership philosophy. I don't think it's ever too early to figure out what your leadership philosophy is. And I think any person that you bring in, whether it's a contractor or whether it's an employee, you should always be sharing with them in day one, this is your leadership philosophy. And when you're able to do that, you're able to help them work with you better, right? If they don't understand what your leadership style is, what your philosophy is, guess what? It's going to be hard for them to read your mind. And one of the biggest things that happens with agency owners, new agency owners, is that they have this belief, or at least they like to believe, that when someone comes in and they give them maybe the processes or systems they've been using, that those systems and processes are enough for them to do the work, right? But here's the challenge, right? Systems and processes are great. My gosh, like, I look at strategic systems all the time, but there's something that you need something very extra special to make systems and processes work, and it's called leadership. Right? Like,
Yeah.
people make systems and processes work, right? That's the underlying factor, people. And so if you are working with people, you've got to get clear on what your leadership philosophy is. And so, as I'm talking about leadership philosophy, I'll just share what it is.
I was just going to
Leadership
ask you,
philosophy.
so that was perfect segue. Please tell us, Audrey, your leadership philosophy, because I think that will help our listeners kind of understand what you mean by that word.
Yeah, yeah. So leadership philosophy is three things. It's understanding what your values are, what you expect from the values, and what are the boundaries in that values. Okay. And I'll share with you an example of one of mine. So one of mine is transparency. So I value transparency. And because I value transparency, I expect anyone that I bring into my team, whether it's a contractor or an employee, to be open and honest and be able to come to me and share any problems and challenges that they have. I want them to be transparent. The boundary with this looks like this. Now, when you do come to me with a problem or a challenge that you have, what really helps me support you is if you come to the table with at least 2 or 3 solutions and tell me why one solution is your option going forward, right? Do you see how clear I am? Like it's not just here's a value and this is what I value and off you go. I'm actually
Here's how to
defining that
execute it.
value.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the goal, right? If you want to bring people into your business, whether it's a contractor or whether it's an employee, you yourself have to do the work of getting clear about your own philosophy first and communicate it back out. Because leadership, the underlying power of leadership, meaning what makes it powerful is your communication. Right? Leadership is nothing without communication, right? And so you
Oh
can
yeah.
see this, yeah. And you can see if you bring someone on, if the very first thing you did was communicate your leadership philosophy, they would have a better liftoff working with you because they immediately know, oh, this is the value, but now you've explained how it looks like, and oh, here's a boundary to that value, right? So I know how to approach, right? And make sure that I align with your value. So those and I gotta say this too. Of course, you're communicating values to others and setting the boundaries through your values, but it's not a one-way street, right? Your job is to also say, okay, I'd also like to know what your values are and hear those values and see how they express it, right? Because again, working with people is exactly that. It's always gonna be a one-to-one relationship. And one of the things I think people get confused about when they think I'm building a team is that, oh, I'm building a group of people. And if I can just apply my one leadership style to all these people, everything will be okay. But leadership is actually a one-to-one thing. Your job as a leader is to understand your people in a one-to-one, people to people environment, right? And how do you do that? Is yes, sharing your leadership philosophy, but also making sure that you are understanding other people's values too, right? And that really plays into, I think, some of the things that Tyler, you've mentioned you interested in knowing more about, and that is like motivation, right? And morale and those things, right? And this plays right into it. Like you start with the leadership philosophy, you understand what other people's values are, and from there you can really build in more motivation and morale in your team.
I think that that's huge. That's really important because it's similar to something that I preach all the time, which is setting clear expectations from the very beginning with your clients sets you up for success with your clients. Like, if the listeners of my podcast have heard me talk about this many times, but like, if you could have an amazing client and you could get amazing results for that client, but if you didn't set the proper goal benchmarks for what those great outcomes look like, they don't know what a good cost per click is. They don't know what a good,
Mm.
cost per acquisition is. If you don't set those clear benchmarks from the very beginning, then you and your team could be celebrating all you want behind the scenes, but the client has no idea and they may be unhappy. Maybe they had benchmarks that are completely out of aligned with what reality is. And then you could end up in the worst place, which is having an angry client or an upset client or disappointed client when you're actually doing really, really great job for them. And that what you just said to me about the leadership style is kind of a reflection of that, but just inside the house instead of outside with the clients. It's setting the proper expectations of your own leadership style and how they can properly execute that so that the both people, the team members and the leader have a great working relationship. If you don't set the clear expectations of what you're looking for from their work product, from them working with you, then you're setting yourself up for failure because they could be thinking that you want something else because you didn't set that proper goal essentially. So communicating that, setting the proper expectations and letting them know your leadership philosophy and how they can achieve that tactically is huge. So I love that. And it actually goes right into our next question very, very well, which is you mentioned something on the end there about how effective leadership is one to one, not one to many. And so, how do you effectively leadership one to one? Essentially, how do you adjust your leadership style per employee or per contractor?
Yeah, so good. There are two things I think that are essential when you are leading a contractor or employee for you to understand, right? And the first thing is competence, and the second thing is confidence, right? Now, if you're hiring a contractor, obviously you're going to want to hire someone who's extremely competent and confident, right? And if you're hiring someone who's extremely competent and confident, then your goal is to ensure that you clearly communicate what the major goal is that you want to achieve. And you're not bent over the processes of how they get there, right? Because if they are a great contractor, your job is to ensure competence and confidence, and then give them very clear goals, right? And then, of course, sharing your leadership style, right? And that's what we do when we hire contractors. We're looking for those two things. Now, the difference is in employees, right? When you hire an employee, oftentimes with an employee, you're giving them different projects, you're giving them different tasks. And in a small agency, that is oftentimes more so the case than a larger agency, right? Because you have more resources, you can actually define the roles in much more clarity. When you have a smaller agency, oftentimes one role has two, sometimes even three functions, right? And when that happens, you need to make sure that any new project or task that you're giving someone, you're evaluating what is the competence level in that project or task, and what's the confidence level they have in that project and task. So what that means is one size does not fit all, right? So if you are delegating a project to someone, you're delegating it to them because they have a high competence, high confidence, right? So delegating is simply, here's this goal, go get it, right? That's delegation, right? But leadership has many different styles, right? That's one style. And I think in our, on our online world, we hear a lot of just delegate it, just delegate it, just delegate it.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous. Okay. It's very dangerous because no, you just can't delegate everything, especially in an employee environment where you might give this person who has maybe two or three functions a new project, right? And in that new project, guess what? Maybe they have low competence, but high confidence, right? If that's the case, what are you going to do? You're not going to delegate the actual task to them, right? And so what it comes down to as a leader is really understanding that there are four different styles that you can really apply in helping someone grow, be more motivated, and improve the morale. And that those four styles are, of course, there's delegation, there's supporting, there's coaching, and there's directing. There's four different styles, right? And I'll just share kind of what those styles are. I'll explain kind of what they are. Supportive leadership gives an individual space to really prove themselves, and they can lead the process, but with little direction, right? Because they have experience working on similar projects. I'll repeat that again. So you would use supportive types of leadership styles because this person has experience working on similar projects, which means that, hey, look, like they might have some confidence in it, but do they have full competence? No, right? So you're going to want to support them through it. Okay. Now, the other style is coaching. And typically, when we think of like leadership styles, we think of like either coaching or either delegating, right? But coaching is oftentimes, um, I would say, best for people who have lower competence and lower confidence than supporting. Okay. So if you're supporting someone, remember, they have some track record of doing something along the same vein in the same project, right? So, but now they're working on a similar one and just they need a little bit of support from you to get it through, right? And after you support them, typically you can start delegating it, right? But in coaching is like one level down from supporting, if you think of it that way, okay? So coaching is applied when someone has less competence and less confidence in what they're doing. And it could look like this. You have a account manager, right? And they need to step into account director role. So they don't have any experience stepping into an account director role, right? So you are now taking them from one role and leaping into other, and that requires coaching. It doesn't require you saying, hey, great, you're an account manager, you had an account director, you saw how they were working, go for it. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to
Yeah.
actually come
Yeah.
alongside them and coach them through it, right? So, and then
Yeah.
there's direction and delegating, right? So, directive leadership is a type of leadership that most will fear, right? So, directive leadership is like, I'm giving you all the directions, I'm telling you what to do. People fear
Oh,
that, right? Because no one
micromanager.
wants, yeah, no one wants to be that micromanager. And I absolutely agree that, directive leadership is not where you want to stay in a leadership role, right? But are there places and times where you need to use directive leadership? Absolutely, right? And so
Yeah.
one thing that I encourage people to think about is, look, just because you're in a directive relationship role with someone in your business right now as a leader, it doesn't mean you have to stay there, right? It's your job to get you out of it, right? But when you're in directive leadership, it's very important to communicate, hey, look, like here's the reason why I'm in directive leadership right now. And some of those reasons include there might be a fire that needs to be put out right away. There might be some urgent situations happening that, let's face it, you can't coach or support the person through because there's no time, right? Those are time intensive.
Yeah.
And so you have to direct, right? And there's nothing wrong with directing as long as they're very clear about here's the reason why I'm directing. This is not the type of way I want to lead you, but the matter of fact is this needs to be done in like 6 hours, right? And I don't have
Yeah.
time to teach you or coach you, so let me just tell you what to do. And next time you come across this, here's what I want to see, right? Like that's good direction. It's being crystal clear about why you're directing, what you want to see when you're directing, and what comes after the directing, right? That's the third style. And the fourth style we all know, which is delegate, right? Delegate is actually the style that you lean into when someone has full competence and full confidence. And if you're thinking about even bringing on like contractors, like you just said, the challenge is, sure, they may have full confidence and full competence in what they do, right? But they don't have full confidence and full competence in your systems and processes, right? Because you do things differently, right? So even if you think about bringing a new contractor on, you got to really think to yourself, like, yes, I may be able to delegate portions of the stuff that I'm doing here because they have confidence and competence. But what don't they have competence and confidence on? That maybe delegation in this front isn't it. Maybe they do need some support from me for the next month or 2 months, and getting really clear on those things. Right. So that's what I
Yeah.
mean when I say it's not one size fits all for everything. You got to get clear on what it is you want them to do in your business, understand the confidence and competence of that thing, and then sure, delegate if it's right. But if it's not right, ask yourself, is it support they need? Is it coaching? And if I provide that for, 2 weeks, will I then be able to just delegate? Most likely, yes, right? When it comes to a contractor.
Yeah. So it sounds like these leadership styles can evolve obviously as the role gets more competent and more confident. And it also sounds like the where you start with these leadership styles with these individuals really greatly depends on your hiring style as well. Are you hiring a high confident, high competent person? Are you hiring someone that's more ground level that maybe has a lot of confidence but not competence yet, you know what I mean? So you really are able to, when you look at these four different styles, kind of decide which style is appropriate based off of how they came into the organization and what level they're at in both of those categories. So I think it was really great for the audience because we can kind of easily say, this is the leadership style that would be best for you because this is where you are at on confidence and competence. I think that's probably something more of a leader would keep to themselves, or at least at first, but then can evolve over time. My next question for you is kind of discussing about how inclusion in the organization. So how can you know how can you ensure that decision making processes from the leader are inclusive of all your team members and you don't kind of come across as like the authoritarian in your organization, like this is how it is, just kind of get it done, because nobody wants to work for a person like that, right? Everyone wants to feel included. And I also believe, like just from my own leadership style, that the best decisions are made with in partnership with the people that are on the front lines of your organization. A lot of leaders don't realize that they're pulled back. They're not on those account management calls every single day. They're not in the ads manager every single day. So if you're not including those core team members, you could be doing yourself a huge disservice by just handing the or slamming the gavel down and making a decision. So how do you ensure that those decision making processes are inclusive?
Yeah. I think it's dangerous when you're a leader who, sits in a chair and says to yourself, I think it should be done this way. And this is how it's going to be done, right?
Mhm.
I think that's when it's really dangerous. And the reality is, as you step into leadership and are more removed from the work, you actually don't have a very clear understanding of what's happening on the ground. Like, you're going to lose touch. And I think that the best thing for you to do is to say, yes, I'm going to lose touch. And if you can understand that you're going to lose touch and it's not a bad thing, because that's what your team is for, to keep you in touch, right? And if you know that your team's there to keep you in touch, what do you need to do? You need to consult them. You
Yeah.
need to sit down and consult them, right? You need to sit down and not sit down in conversations where you say to someone, look, I think this is the problem. How are we going to solve it? that's, that's still you applying your shoulds into that conversation, right? And this comes down to what inclusion really is about. Inclusion is about asking better questions of your people. Straight up. Like, the ask
Yeah.
better questions of your people. When you ask better questions of the people, guess what? You get better answers that help you make better decisions. And that's what inclusion is about, right? And if there's one leadership skill that I would say is the most powerful out there, it is learning to ask better questions. And better questions are not the yes or no questions. It is the open-ended questions that allow for you to really hear the thoughts, the concerns, the strengths and weaknesses that are going through someone's brain, right? And that's your goal, right? If you sit down in a conversation with your leaders and you want to be inclusive, you're asking questions that, like I just mentioned, you want to know the challenges, of course, right? You want to know what's going on, but you also want to know the strengths of what's happening and the weaknesses that are available to you, right? That you want to have an eye on. Because if you don't understand those things, guess what? You can't make better decisions. And here's the thing:
Right.
sometimes as a leader, you don't need to jump to making a decision right away, right? If your job is to consult the people in your business over a bigger decision, then do that. Consult, sit down, talk to them, ask questions, pull out a better understanding of strengths, weaknesses, challenges, opportunities, right? Pull those out, take it away, look at what everyone has said, and make a decision from that point, right? But from there, you can really say to people, I've considered all your perspectives, because that's what considering all your perspectives is actually about. Sitting down with people, asking better questions, understanding threats, opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, and then making a decision.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important. It's like not just important, it's critical. If you're not plugged into what's going on the ground in your decision-making processes, you're flying blind. And if you don't, and I think also if you haven't fostered an environment where your team members feel comfortable telling you no, then you're in a dangerous spot too. Yeah, I've seen organizations where the owner will only accept a yes, right? So the owner throws down a, command or a this is what we need to do, make it happen kind of thing. And everyone just says, yes, boss, yes, yes, that's and because nobody wants to be that detractor, right? But those organizations I think are just totally set up for failure because like what we were talking about, the owner is oftentimes unplugged and just, not really realizing that it either can't be done on time, or if it is going to be done, it's going to cause XYZ problem, or maybe it shouldn't be done at all. This other thing should be done first, or there's just a lot of different scenarios. So I think one thing that, I just from my own experience is you need to have somebody in your organization, maybe your right hand or a number two or a manager within your organization that, has the goal to say, no, if we do it the way you want to do it, XYZ could happen and that could cause a much bigger problem for us. I think I'm on board with your goal of getting this outcome, but here from my experience on the ground is how I think we should better do it. And empowering your employees to be able to have that voice will save you
Mhm.
so much trouble.
Yeah, I think the concept that you're bringing up is called psychological safety, right? So, psychological safety in an organization means that people feel that they can share their ideas and share their creativity and be wrong, right? And being wrong is
Mhm.
not a bad thing. Being wrong is just part of the creative process, right? And it's interesting. It's interesting what you said about certain types of leaders who, they come at it with this approach where it's like they just want yes people, but
Mhm.
I've also found that certain leaders who want yes people then also want their team to take initiative. And if you want yes people, I'm sorry, you're not gonna have a team that takes initiative. Like, they're mutually
Right.
exclusive of each other, right? And I think that what you're drawing out is that, hey, if you want a business that is truly gonna be unique and different and grow without you, but also make an impact in your space, then you don't want yes people on your team. You want people who are gonna actually take initiatives. And the only way to get people to take initiative in your organization is to remove what I call the equation of fear, right? So when you have fear in your workplace, guess what? People are not going to show up at their best. And if they're not showing up their best every day, you're going to become that micromanager. You're going to put yourself in a position where you feel like you have to tell everyone what to do, right? It's almost like this repeated cycle where it's like, look, like I want my people to take initiative, and I want them to, step up, but I'm gonna step in here and tell them exactly what to do, because unless I do that, they're not gonna take initiative, right? That's the cycle that people get caught in.
It's
They have to
not
get themselves
initiative.
out of. No, it's not. It's like, if you want people to take initiative, you can't come in there and be like, well, in order for them to take initiative, I gotta tell them what to do. No, that's the opposite of initiative, right? And
Right.
how you build initiative actually comes back down to the words competence and confidence. People who take initiative have those two things going for them: competence and confidence, right? And as a leader, that if you want your team to be creative, innovative, and take initiative, that's what you want to build in them, is that competence level and that confidence level, so that they can own the work in their own way, right? And when you are building a business that is innovative and high performers, this is really key. You want to make the goal the actual post and not the processes. So what I mean by that is, the goal has to be the goal post and not the processes. Sure, systems and processes are really important in a business, but guess what? The actual goal in itself has to be very clear for your team, right? You have the
Right.
goal, you make it clear to your team, you build competence and confidence to hit that goal, right? That's how you get initiative takers. That's how you get high performers.
Absolutely. I honestly, I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that leads to your team making those initiatives and going that extra mile and contributing like that is a level of high morale on your team. If you have a team that's defeated or low morale, you're not going to get that, that extra initiative or good outcomes generally. So what do you think are some of the most effective ways that you found to build and maintain high levels of morale and motivation on a team?
Yeah. I gotta say this. Motivation and morale is not a pizza party that you throw at lunch, or
Yes.
the golf game that you take everyone to at the end of the day, right? So I gotta put that out there,
that's
because I
also
think
not that's also not culture either.
no, it's not a culture either. So I
Yeah.
just gotta put that out there. First thing I say is that, because I think a lot of people out there think, oh great, if I have a throw a party, and then everyone's gonna have fun and they're gonna come back motivated, right? But I mean, there's time and place for that. I'm not saying don't do that. There's a time and place for what I'm saying is that true motivation isn't that, right? And I think
Yeah.
one thing is fair. Tyler, if you look at what motivates you is very different than what motivates someone else. We're not all motivated by the exact same things, right? And so your job as a leader is going back to this idea that leadership is very much one to one at times, right? Because if you don't understand what motivates each individual, then you're going to have a hard time getting them to hit their goals, right? Now, some people might be motivated by money, right? Some people might be motivated by affirmation. Some people might be motivated by status. There are different types of motivators out there. And our job as a leader is to understand what is that motivator for this person, right? And those
How?
motivators can,
How do we find that out?
yeah. So I believe in an organization, the motivators are done through one-to-ones, right? So really in an organization,
Mm,
it is about ensuring that you have, and in smaller organization, it looks a little different. It's not a 3-month rhythm. So 3-month rhythm for performance reviewing, right, is how we really help to have conversations that help us understand what motivates people, right? Now in a smaller organization, I see performance reviews being done every 6 months, because the teams are, smaller, and so there's a lot more runtime for projects. Whereas in a bigger organization, projects go a lot faster, right? And so 3-month sprints make sense. But really, what you want to be doing to motivate your people is ensuring that they understand, hey, every 3 months or every 6 months, whatever that rhythm is, that you're going to be meeting to talk about their goals, right? So what are their goals? What are the goals that they had in the last time frame? Were they achieved? If they were achieved, great. What strengths came out of that? What was important for them during that process? What challenges did they have? And what do they want to see for themselves in the next 3 months or the next 6 months, right? And that's what it comes down to, is being able to give people the opportunity to express what they want to see for themselves across 3 months and 6 months. Because guess what? If you don't ask that question, you're never going to know. And if you're never going to know, you're going to assume. And if you assume, you're not motivating anyone but yourself. Straight up.
yeah, totally. I think that also just like crescendos your point, 10 minutes ago about asking the right questions, right?
Yep,
If you want to
absolutely.
find out what motivates your team members in those one-to-ones, you need to ask the right questions, like some of the ones that you were just talking about. So that's spot on. I
Yeah.
do
And
want
I
to
gotta say
shift
one more
gears a
thing.
little bit.
Oh,
Oh yeah, no, go
oh,
ahead.
yeah. I want to say one more thing. I think I want to talk about a bit about raises and salaries. One of the things that happens in a organization is that new leaders think, okay, well, shouldn't just getting a raise every year be motivation, right? I think there's a common thought out there that, oh, if I give a person a raise every year, isn't that motivation? And there's an actual study out there, and the name of the study does not cross my mind right now, but there's an actual study out there that demonstrates this. When you give people raises, right? Sure, it is an incentive, right? But here's the challenge with raises, right? If you give a person a raise every year they expect that raise, right? And it doesn't motivate them more, but they expect the raise. But if you don't give them that raise, it actually demotivates them. So the correlation between giving someone a raise and raising motivations is not there, right? They expect a raise, sure, right? But if you don't give them a raise, it demotivates them. Right. So I gotta say that. So oftentimes giving people a raise in an organization is really not enough to keep someone motivated, right? It really is leaning into the one-to-ones, asking better questions, and clarifying their work plans for the 3 months or 6 months in a way that helps them understand that this work plan is to support them to reach their goals and their motivations for doing those goals. That's what I want to
Yeah,
just put
and
out there as the last
that
point.
demotivation is a very dangerous place to be as well, because I think once you've hit that, it would be extremely hard to recover from that, um, in an organization once that
Yep.
demotivation has happened. So I do, while I still have you, I want to shift gears just a
Mhm.
little bit because you have a lot of expertise in so many areas, and we've touched on leadership, but I also do want to chat with you a little bit about networking and collaboration in the agency industry. In your experience, what do you think are some effective strategies for agency leaders to enhance collaboration within the industry? Because I think a lot of us
Yeah.
work in silos, and we're all these like lone wolves out there, but collaboration helps so much. So what are your thoughts on that?
Mhm. I am a champion of collaborations. So, what does that mean? I have a network called Agency Together, and we are on a mission to end this idea that the agency world has to be very dog eat dog. So, what do I mean by dog eat dog is like if I get a client, you lose a client, right? So, I think in the
Mm,
agency world, there's this mentality there that people feel that way. If I get a client, you lose a client. And I'm on this mission to end that kind of thought because I think as small agencies, the power is in collaborating together, right? Now, if we look at larger agencies, they have more resources, they have more money to do things, right? And they can be out there as the lone wolf, right? And they can win as the lone wolf. But as small agencies, collaboration is how we win together, right? And so, how can agencies collaborate more? Well, I am, and much like you, Tyler, you talk about the power of niching, right? So, as a small agency, there is a power in finding a niche and owning a niche. And I'm a big believer that niche agencies should and can come together to collaborate more. And that's what we do in Agency Together. We bring together niche agency owners for three purposes. Number one, it's referrals, right? If you're an HVAC agency owner and you're a dentist agency owner, there's no reason why you shouldn't be referring to each other. It absolutely makes sense because your contacts would fit each other, right? That's the one thing, right? Referrals. The second is connections, right? So maybe there are connections that you haven't shared before that you can share with each other, right? And those connections can lead to better conversations, right? That's the second thing. And the third thing is what I call strategic leverage collaborations, right? So leverage collaborations look like this. So inside Agency Together, let's say we right now have a group of agency owners, and each of them have their own networks, right? And they may have things like their own email list, right? And so if we combine those together and do more leveraged activities, like say for example, inside the actual network that we have, we put together things like panels and roundtables and private podcasts, and we distribute them among each other's audience. We raise the visibility, right, of everyone in that group
yeah,
by leveraging each other's network together. Right? And those are some of the things
yeah.
that's really being missed out on right now for agency owners is we're not banding together to leverage each other's networks and doing it in a smart way, right? And that's what I'm all about right now. I'm all about just helping small agency owners thrive by collaborating.
I love that. I love that so much because that's kind of been uh, one of my core principles since I started my Done for Your Agency program and started, working with agencies all the back in 2015, is that exactly what you said. Just because one person gets a client does not mean it takes away from another person.
No.
And that kind of applies across the entire, business world. Is everyone thinks that it's this, this cutthroat environment. And it even goes into the whole niching conversation, like you talked about. Like, people will say, oh, I don't want to go into that niche because it's so saturated and like I'll never get any clients or whatever. And it's like, what do you mean? There are literally hundreds of millions of businesses out there around the world, and there are way, way less amount of agencies. Like, there is enough clients in every niche to go around times 10 for all of the agencies out there. All the businesses are not already taken. There are new businesses that pop up all the time, and this mindset of like, it's too saturated, I'm never going to get a client there. It goes in that same vein.
Yeah, to that I gotta say this. I mean, do you want a niche with no competition? Because if a niche has no competition, it most likely means that there's no business in that niche.
Right.
That's my common reply to someone who says, "Oh, but it's too packed. There's too many people in that niche." And my thought is, you know what? Competition is a good thing in the marketplace because it means there's business there, there's a need there, right? So don't be afraid of the competition. Never be afraid of the
Yeah.
competition. Now, now
Right.
that's and that's to say niching is something that I think is the most powerful thing that a small agency owner can do. I actually truly believe that um, if you are a small agency and in order to compete well, finding a niche and owning it is one of the most powerful things you can do because when you own a niche, you build intellectual property. And when you build intellectual property, it means that you're able to do things faster, do things better than, the person who's not niche, who doesn't understand the industry, who doesn't understand the nuances. And that to me is, the way of the future for small agencies is really owning a niche, but building intellectual property in that niche.
Yeah, absolutely. If you need to find your market, and you also should collaborate well with other agencies that can really help you. And kind of talking about what we've been talking about for the whole time, you need to be an effective leader all the way through it. So my next question kind of ties all of those things a little bit together. What can you just discuss any approaches to networking, on the topic of collaboration, that you believe are underutilized by agency owners today?
hmm Well, when we think of networking, I think oftentimes people don't think of networking as a system of itself, right? So we
Mhm.
approach networking as very random, right? And I think when we approach networking as very random, it doesn't really become a good channel, right? It doesn't become a strong channel. And I truly believe that networking should be a system for every business owner. And when I say system, it could be as simple as this, right? If you know what your goals are in your business, you should be able to identify, let's just say to begin with, 20 people, right, that you think could be great contacts to help you reach your goal, right? And if you know what those or who those 20 people are, then you need to be strategic about what you're doing in a month. So let's say you have 20 work days in a month. Well, every day you should be doing some sort of outreach to one person on your list of 20, right? And you got to be really clear about what your outreach looks like, right? So outreach could be as simple as thanking someone for something. And I think what I see out there that doesn't work with networking is simply reaching out and say, hey, Tyler, thanks for that information you sent me. And that type of thank you
Yeah.
doesn't work. You're like, okay, no effort there. But like, we're talking about genuine, right? Genuine thank yous where it's like, hey, Tyler, remember that conversation that we had like 2 weeks ago where you said this thing right here? Well, I didn't think of it then, but I thought of it a week after. And here's the outcome that helped me achieve. That's a good thank you. That's when people remember,
Hmm.
right? So, getting strategic
Yeah.
is exactly that, right? Every week you should be reaching out to maybe one person in a day, right? And making sure that you're thanking someone. If you're not thanking someone, you're connecting people, right? Connecting people is important, right? Now, again, when it comes to connecting people, here's the what not to do. Don't force it. So if
Yeah.
you are connecting two people, you don't want to force that connection. If it doesn't make sense to connect them, don't connect them. But you want to make genuine connections between people that people value, right? Another thing you want to do
Yeah.
is a catch up, right? So a third thing you can do in a week is a catch up. A catch up is simple as this. hey, like I saw on Instagram that your dog had puppies, right? Wanted to reach out and say, oh my gosh, like I am a lover of labs, like whatever that's true catching up, right? It's being contextual to what's happening to that person and just dropping a note. It's never asking people for more in a catch up. Asking people for more in a catch up sounds something like this. Hey, like I saw that, your dog had puppies. I'm wondering, can you tell me the process from A to Z of how like you nurtured your dog to, have these amazing puppies? That's not a catch up, right? That's a lot of work for someone to support you with, right? So really, if you're thinking about networking, it is a system, right? It's understanding like if you have a goal, who are the 20 people that you want to be connected to and reach your goal. In a given week, you have 5 days. What are you going to do each day of the week for one person, right? Are you going to thank someone? Are you going to connect someone? Are you going to catch up with someone, right? And also, are you going to make an ask? Right? Because that's important too in your network, right? You have to know when to make an ask. And networking with people is not always making an ask. It's kind of like a bank account, right? If you think of a bank account, when you are depositing, you're adding value to that relationship, right? The more value you add, if you want to take out of it, it's easier to take out of it. And that's what a good networking system does, right? It's strategic, you're depositing, and then when you're withdrawing, you're not withdrawing all its value, you're drawing some value from it.
Totally. I was, if you weren't going to say it, I was going to say it about the adding value yourself, in that catch up, asking them, is there's anything else that you can provide to help them? Is there any connections that or if you can think of a connection that would be good for them, offering that up and providing that and just leading with value. Leading with
Mm,
value works amazing when you're networking for your agency with other, potential collaborators, white label providers, freelancers, all of that kind of stuff, affiliate connections, and also with your own leads and your own
mm,
potential clients. Anytime that you can lead with value, you're taking that first step of really showing that if a possible partnership in any way, whether we became our agency became a marketing partner for your business, or we became a white label partner for your other agency, if
mm.
you lead with value, you're showing them that in that partnership you already have a lot to offer, and so you're just kind of kicking that door in and shining the light right away. We are already running low on time, but I always have my final question that I have to ask every guest that I end every show with, and that I'm excited to ask you because you've been a wealth of knowledge so far. But if you had to give just one piece of advice for a brand new agency owner that's just starting their agency today, what would your number one piece of advice be?
My number one piece of advice would be start building your list of contacts and do the networking thing, because when you're first starting out, your clients are not coming from social media. They're most likely not coming from ads either. And the highest value you can have in your business when you're first starting out is building your network and providing value to others, having more conversations, showing up where you think you can support people. These are all things that I think any starting agency owner really needs to invest in at the very beginning.
I love that. Slam dunk answer too, because when I started my agency, my very first clients that got me going was my immediate network. I sat down and said, what business owners do I already know of? Friends, connections, family members, whatever. The first thing you do, it's totally free, is just let your own little local network know, hey, I'm an agency now, and these are the things that I provide, and I'd love to work with you, or see how your marketing is doing. Lead with some value. You know what I mean? You could say, I noticed that you're doing XYZ on social. Here's some things that might really help, improve that, put that value up front, and just tell your network. So many people often overlook this. They immediately go to, I need to go find those strangers around the country that are these companies that will pay me. But you can get cash flow and revenue just from looking down the street, just from looking
Mhm.
down the neighborhood. And a lot of people say, oh, well, but I don't really know very many business owners. If you stop and just look at your circle of friends that or your immediate or even extended family members, somebody owns a business. Somebody owns a business. And no, they may not become your next client, but you may tell that person, that you have an agency, this is what you do. And that business owner, while they may not become your client, that business owner may say, oh, but hey, my nephew, I have this other business that I think might definitely be a good fit for you. Let me introduce you. And that is how those first, uh, those first clients often happen so easily for for new agency owners, and it's skipped and it's missed, and they start dumping money into all these different things to try and get their
Yeah.
clients, when you can get a huge jump start, a huge boost to your agency right off the bat by just looking and stopping and thinking and putting yourself out there for free to your friends, family, local network.
Absolutely. Mic drop on that one. I think we're both on the
Mm,
exact same page. The easiest thing is often the best thing when you're first starting. The more complicated that you make it, that's exactly what it becomes, more complicated, more work, right? And that's not what you want when you start your business. Going out, talking to your friends and family, even though they might not be clients, a great question to ask them is, hey, what business owners do you know in your network, and can you connect me for a conversation, right? Like those are great, just low hanging fruit things that anyone can and you should be doing, especially when you're first starting out. Yeah, 100% agree.
absolutely. Audrey Kwan of AJK Consulting, I want to thank you again so much for your time. This has been a fantastic episode with a million different clippable nuggets. So I'm excited to get this out there and published. But thank you again so much for joining us.